We hear about sudden stops in economics all the time. It's like one of those phrases that gets thrown around,
Yeah.
especially with developing countries. But what's so interesting is how rarely we talk about the role inequality plays.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. We often get caught up in like the technicalities, like,
Yeah.
focusing on currency fluctuations and interest rates.
Exactly. It's like we forget there are real people behind those numbers.
Right.
But when a country experiences a sudden stop,
Right.
when it can no longer borrow money from other countries,
Yeah.
the effects are anything but abstract.
Right. Imagine a faucet that provides a country with the funds it needs to keep its economy running, and then suddenly that faucet is shut off.
Hmm.
This can cripple businesses, lead to massive layoffs, and even cause prices to go way up as essential goods become more scarce.
Yeah. It's essentially a financial heart attack
Yeah.
for a nation. And here's where I really started to geek out. When I was reading this research paper from the Federal Reserve, it suggests that your neighbor's financial stability, or lack thereof, can actually impact how severely a country gets hit by one of these sudden stops.
Yeah, the paper focuses on this domino effect called the debt deflation mechanism, and it argues that inequality within a country can either accelerate or put the brakes on this domino effect.
Okay, let's unpack this domino analogy a bit.
Okay, so imagine a line of dominoes, all perfectly balanced, a negative shock to the economy, like a global recession or a sudden spike in interest rates. That's the first domino falling. So this first domino falling, this can cause people who are heavily in debt to start selling off their assets, things like houses, stocks, bonds, to make their loan payments.
Okay, so it's like a chain reaction starting. But how does this initial selling turn into like a full-blown crisis?
Well, imagine a scenario where thousands or even millions of people are suddenly forced to sell their assets. This flood of selling pushes prices down, which is where the other dominoes start to fall.
Right, because suddenly
Yeah.
everyone's investments are worth less.
Exactly. And as asset prices plummet, it can trigger a cascade of consequences. People might hit their borrowing limits, companies might face bankruptcy, and banks might become more wary of lending. This is that debt deflation spiral in action.
So we've got this domino effect.
Right.
But you mentioned that inequality throws a wrench into the works. How's...
Yeah. Here's where it gets really interesting. Remember those falling asset prices? Well, not everyone reacts the same way. Let's say you have a group of wealthy individuals and households with low debt. They see these plummeting prices and think, opportunity. They swoop in, buying up those assets at a discount, almost like savvy shoppers at a flash sale.
So instead of panicking, they're actually stabilizing the market.
Precisely. Their actions can create a floor, preventing prices from completely bottoming out. This is the damping effect of inequality. However, on the flip side, we have the amplifying effect, and this is where things get a little disheartening.
Okay, walk me through that. Who's on this side of the equation?
Think about folks who are already struggling before the crisis hit. Maybe they're living paycheck to paycheck. Maybe they're dealing with high levels of debt. When those asset prices start falling, even a small dip can push them over the edge. They're forced to sell their assets. Not because it's a savvy financial move, but because they have no other choice.
And this is where that domino effect really kicks into overdrive.
Exactly. This wave of distress selling pushes prices down even further, which forces more people to sell. And the cycle just intensifies, making the crisis even worse for everyone. To illustrate this, the researchers analyzed data from Mexico's 2009 crisis and found a striking disparity. Wealthy households, those with low debt, actually increased their real estate holdings by over 60% during the crisis. In contrast, highly leveraged households, the ones most vulnerable, saw a 37% decrease in their real estate asset.
So while some were benefiting from the chaos, others were being crushed by it. It really makes you realize how interconnected our financial lives really are.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought, isn't it? And it highlights how inequality can create a system where some are insulated from economic shocks, while others are left incredibly exposed.
So we've been talking about Mexico, but this isn't just about one country in 2009, right?
Right.
This debt deflation mechanism amplified by inequality. It feels like a hidden current that could be shaping economic crises everywhere.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. What happened in Mexico is just one example. And the researchers suggest that this dynamic is likely at play in economies all around the world, influencing how different countries weather those financial storms.
Which makes you wonder, if we know this is happening, what can we actually do about it? Is there any way to, like, calm these choppy waters?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. The paper doesn't offer like a silver bullet solution. I mean, let's face it, economics rarely works that way. But it does hint at some intriguing possibilities.
Okay.
Right.
I'm all ears. Give me some hope here.
Okay, well, one idea that caught my eye is the importance of financial literacy, especially for lower income households. If we can equip people with the knowledge and tools to manage debt effectively and to just make, sound financial decisions, they might be less susceptible to those amplifying forces during a crisis.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like giving those dominoes a wider base so they're not as easily toppled. But what about at a broader level? What can policymakers do?
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting. The paper suggests that promoting broader asset ownership, particularly among lower and middle income households, could actually play a significant role in mitigating these crises.
So instead of having a concentrated group of wealthy individuals kind of propping up the market during a downturn, you'd have this much larger pool of investors providing stability.
Exactly. It's like diversifying a portfolio. But on a national scale, a wider distribution of asset ownership could create a natural buffer against those sudden price drops, making the entire economy more resilient to those external shocks.
This reminds me of that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. It seems like spreading the wealth, both literally and figuratively, could make a real difference.
It really could. It's about creating a more inclusive and equitable financial system, one that not only benefits individuals, but also strengthens the economy as a whole.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to chew on today. We've gone beyond the usual headlines about economic crises to uncover this hidden link between inequality and financial instability. We've explored this fascinating debt deflation mechanism and even dipped our toes into potential solutions.
Yeah, and perhaps most importantly, we've highlighted that even in something as complex and seemingly distant as a global economic crisis, our individual actions and the choices of policymakers can have a ripple effect on the entire system.
It's been a pleasure diving deep with you. Until next time.